Todd Spitzer's been in politics for a quarter century now. School board, county supervisor, state assemblyman, supervisor again. He's earned a reputation as a smart, tough, tireless, and reform-minded public official, a strong advocate for his constituents, a champion of cops and crime victims. He's also been accused of grandstanding, impulsiveness, and a short temper, and a thin skin. Now he's in a heated campaign to unseat longtime but embattled Orange County DA Tony Rackauckas. Should Tony go, and is Todd the right replacement? Todd Spitzer, he's next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with Memorial Care, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.
I did sing in telegrams. That's how I put myself through college.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you get, oh, that's great. Yeah. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff, and I'm talking with Todd Spitzer. Todd, great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thanks.
You're always making headlines. You're always in the news. Let's get personal for a moment.
All
Let
right.
these voters, especially since you have represented Irvine and much of South County in your career, both as an assemblyman and as a supervisor. So maybe for folks who aren't familiar with you, or in other parts of Orange County or Southern California for that matter, tell us a little bit about who you are, where'd you grow up, and how'd you get into politics?
You know, I ran for office in 7th grade. I ran for treasurer in my 7th and 8th grade class. I don't think I handed out potholders, but I did something to try to entice people to vote for me. And I was the treasurer in my 7th, 8th, and 8th grade class. I ran for elective office. I wasn't successful when I went to UCLA as an undergrad. I grew up in Montebello, which is about 10 miles east of Los Angeles. And I grew up in an area that in the 1960s and 70s that had a lot of civil unrest. In fact, what's happening in Orange County today, 50, 60 years later, is exactly what was happening in Los Angeles then. In fact, when I was born, Orange County had 500,000 people. Today it has 3.3 million people. We had riots in East Los Angeles in 1968, and we had riots in Anaheim in 2012. So what's happening is what I saw growing up is now starting to happen in Orange County now that we don't have any particular ethnic group that's a majority in Orange County. And we're now a melting pot. We are having all the same kind of social and urban problems that you see in big cities.
Okay, and you talk about what you've done. You were a teacher, you were a reserve officer, and all that, and for a long time,
there's a little bit of an order there,
for a number of years, you've wanted to be the DA. So you've always been kind of a law guy. So just talk about what in your formative years made you this law enforcement guy.
Well, it's a little bit different than that because I was a teacher, right? And I worked at KFI Radio for Bill Handel. So I've done a lot of things and I've been very eclectic. So when I graduated from college and I was chosen to be a Senate fellow in the state Senate, that was the year in 1982 that John Seymour, the former mayor of Anaheim, went to Sacramento. Ed Royce was elected to the state Senate. And so I went to Sacramento and I was a fellow. And I worked for John Seymour, who was a freshman, and he didn't have any staff, so I got to do everything. And in those days, you could smoke in the Capitol, and he sent me with 20 bill ideas, and he said, okay, go get these drafted into bills. And so I went in, and the guy was smoking, and blowing smoke in my face. Didn't say a word. This lawyer, right? Ledge counsel for 2 hours. I finished. I was so proud of myself. I had gone through all my notes, did exactly what Senator Seymour asked me to do. And he blows smoke in my face. He says, we have a little problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, everything you're suggesting is unconstitutional. Rick, I didn't know what he was talking about. Like literally, I had a 4-year degree from one of the most prominent universities in the nation, and I was an English major, but I didn't understand what he meant. And I had an epiphany in that moment that I needed more education. So I went and got my law degree at University of California, Hastings, but then I was also so intrigued by public policy that I got my master's degree at Berkeley at the same time. And so then when I graduated, I immediately became a prosecutor here in Orange County. I had clerked as a law clerk in the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. And then once I started working in the DA's office, I was like, wow, I need to get more experience. So I went to work at KFI Radio. And when I interviewed for that job, they said, wait a minute, you're a prosecutor during the week in Orange County, yeah. And why do you want to work at KFI? I said, well, I want to run for office someday, because I knew that. But I had no media experience. So I was like, I need to get media experience. So they were, okay, you could work on Handel's show, which was Handel on the Law, Saturday morning, but you got to do Nick Federoff on gardening. And so I was like, Nick Federoff on gardening, we're on the air at 5 o'clock in the morning, but this is what I knew about myself, and this is what most people know about me. I will do whatever it takes to get where I want to go, all right? I'm really unabashed about that. And so if I have to wash dishes, which I've done, to become a busboy, in order to become a waiter, I'll do all those things, because I understand you got to pay your dues. But what I still appreciate about myself is I'm not so proud that I won't do something that may be perceived as menial in order to get where I want to go. So I worked for Handel, and then I decided, hey, I could go to the police academy. So I went to the Los Angeles Police Academy at night and on the weekends, 9 months, while I was still a prosecutor doing trials during the week. And at the end, I became a police officer, and I volunteered for LAPD for 10 years.
Has that experience, has the police experience helped you, or did it help you as a prosecutor?
It made me so much better prosecutor, because when you're a prosecutor, your job is to explain to the jury, what happened, right? You have to kind of recreate what happened, and they can't go to the crime scene, right? They're prohibited from doing that unless the judge allows them. So you have to recreate the situation in a courtroom. And because I had done the work myself, whether it was stopping somebody for driving under the influence or, responding to a bank robbery, I could put myself in the same situation as my law enforcement witnesses in court, and I could slow things down almost like a movie so that the jurors could understand and I could walk them through incrementally. And I think that's why I was such a successful prosecutor. I mean, I've done over 100 jury trials to verdict. I've done thousands of cases, attempted murder, hardcore gang members, sexual assault, bank robbery, home invasion robberies. I'm not a guy just running for DA who is just saying, okay, I'd like to try that. I mean, I am a hardcore seasoned prosecutor.
All right, now as a prosecutor, you said it helps you walk the law enforcement officers through the
jury.
Testament.
It helps you walk the jury through what the testimony is.
Does it also help you? Could you ever tell that the officers maybe aren't giving you the whole story?
Oh my goodness!
And you have some.
When I came back to the DA's office after leaving the legislature, I said I want to go back and do trials again, right? Because I just love to do trials. And I had a case in Berea where it was unequivocally clear the cops were lying. And I was like, hey, called the cop back who I'd put on the stand earlier, said, you're going to get back on the stand and you're going to explain what happened, because you are not going to screw up this case. And if the jurors believe that you're sincere and that you are regretful, then maybe we can still have a conviction, which was the appropriate thing to happen. But if they think that you're not trustworthy, then you blew the case, but I'm putting you back on the stand. And I think that's the difference between being an inexperienced prosecutor and being an experienced prosecutor and be able to do those kinds of things. And when you're the leader of the office, which I'm asking the voters to allow me to be as a district attorney, you have to have those kinds of experiences, because you are supervising 275 lawyers, $150 million budget, and another up to 900 employees. If you don't have credibility, if they don't know that you could do the job yourself, then you might as well not ask them to be their boss.
And that brings us to the contest for DA, the election next year. You and the incumbent Tony Rackauckas already up and running, so to speak.
It's up and running.
And so what's your main gripe about Tony Rackauckas?
Well, I have a lot of gripes, but absolutely on the natural. Even forget his record, which we'll get into in a minute. Am I qualified to be district attorney of Orange County? And I think that it's unequivocally yes. I mean, I've been a line prosecutor. Like I said, I've done thousands of cases. Yeah. Prosecuted all these to trial, verdict, excuse me. And I've supervised and I've led in that office. So I unequivocally have that experience. The district attorney of Orange County, I think people sometimes make a mistake that the DA's a trial lawyer, right, goes to court. Well, Mr. Rackauckas made that mistake in the Kelly Thomas case, right? He got a not guilty verdict when a homeless man was, killed by the police in Fullerton. In fact, Kelly Thomas's father has endorsed me in this race. So I have the crime victim support, Crime Victims United of California. I have so many crime victims support, former police chiefs. And so I want to go in and run that office and be the credible district attorney that I can be. Now, that being said, this is a contest. So I not only have to explain to the voters about why I believe I can do the job, but I have to contrast myself with the incumbent, because generally on the natural, throwing out an incumbent is a pretty difficult task.
Yes, it is.
Right? Well, that happened in Los Angeles after the O.J. Simpson trial. Okay.
So let's rather than continue talking right now, let's take a look at you already have campaign ads up, ready to run.
No, they're out on social media.
They've been running. They're on social media.
On social media.
And let's take a look at, we're going to look at snippets of 3 different campaign spots.
Alex, I'll take OC cheating and corruption for 100.
An independent report found this office suffers from a failure of leadership. Melinda.
What is the district attorney's office run by Tony Rackauckas?
Correct. Melinda, you control the board.
He walked into the salon. He shot my wife. Point blank. She didn't deserve it. None of them did.
911, did you police the paramedics? There's a shooting next door.
That was 6 years ago. We're still waiting for justice.
The Department of Justice is looking into allegations as to whether defendants' constitutional rights were violated.
The snitch scandal damaged a slam dunk case. And other killers have received lighter sentences or have been released. 8 people are dead because of Scott DeCry. His death penalty case is in jeopardy because of the wrongdoing by prosecutors. Tony Rackauckas has been in office 20 years. I just don't get it. Too much is at stake. It's time for him to retire. Tony Rackauckas has to go. We've waited long enough for justice. My family and the families of the other victims deserve more.
With Todd Spitzer as Orange County District Attorney, criminals would stay behind bars and victims would get the justice they deserve. The politicians don't want Todd to run. He's beholden to no one except the people and the victims of Orange County.
So you're hitting Tony pretty hard in those spots.
He deserves it. He deserves it. If you take the Jeopardy piece, for example, it's a double entendre, maybe a triple, quadruple entendre, right? You shouldn't play with public safety. It's not a game. This is not a game. You know, one of the things, if you look at the DeCry case and you saw Paul Wilson's wife, Christy, was murdered at the salon with 8 other victims, right? And for 6 years, they were all dragged out. They were dragged in and out of court until finally they got some justice, which was finally a sentence, where the death penalty was taken off the case. When you ask yourself this question on the natural, forget about a campaign. If a district attorney is prosecuting the worst mass murder in Orange County history and is systematically removed from that case, is that person for cheating and fabricating information and not turning over evidence, where not only was the DA kicked off the case, but the death penalty was taken off the table as well? Does that person deserve to get reelected? When O.J. Simpson was acquitted in Los Angeles, the district attorney lost his job. That in and of itself is malpractice.
Okay. Do you think, because this snitch scandal touches not just the prosecutor but the sheriff too, is the sheriff corrupt and is the DA corrupt?
So let me talk about the sheriff first. I've called on the sheriff to resign before she decided not to run again. She had a horrible jail escape where 3 terribly dangerous people escaped from her jail, okay? And it was because there was not protocols in place. They were supposed to be inspecting the plumbing tunnels. They weren't. And over a course of who knows how many months, with some sharp instruments they never should have had, they cut their way out of the jail. Then she was involved in the snitch scandal, and she denied, and delayed. Okay, finally, Judge Goldfuss.
So we got so much to cover.
Yeah.
So, all right, so you called on her
But my point with
to
her, I called on her to resign. She had the ability to understand that the county was more important than her political career, and so she announced her retirement. Rackauckas is exactly the same point, but he won't retire, and he has to retire. 20 years is enough.
Okay, so let's get to Todd Spitzer, because you're the alternative at this point, and it would appear, unless somebody else emerges, that it's going to be you or Tony.
There is some discussion.
And so the one thing that so many people talk about, Todd, is your temperament. Okay, and let's talk. And I'm reading this because even though this was something that Stephen Greenhut, who writes a column in the Orange County Register, said, I could have written that too. I mean, it was kind of, I think it captured a sense of a lot of people. Here's what he had to say. For the years that Supervisor Todd Spitzer has eyed the Orange County District Attorney post, I've heard from political observers who say something to this effect. Spitzer is smart, savvy, and energetic, but it wouldn't be wise to trust him with subpoena power. Few worry about his skills, but many worry about the judgment he might show at the helm of an office with vast powers to prosecute people. I'm sure there's something in there that you agree with, but how do you feel in general, that assessment that, Todd, yeah, you're a great politician, you're a public official, but you're just not the right guy to be the DA?
Well, actually, nothing could be further from the truth. Steve doesn't even know my career when I was a prosecutor. My reputation among the criminal defense bar, the ones you actually work with side by side, and my fellow colleagues in the district attorney's office, has been nothing short of, spectacular. Honorable, with integrity. In fact,
are people just wrong? When
no. My peers in the DA's office elected me the outstanding prosecutor in the district attorney's office. So I think this is this is where I think there's a problem, is that people have observed me as a supervisor or, out in the world of how I've handled situations in the private. We'll be talking about that. And they assume, because they don't understand me as a prosecutor, that somehow that skill set transfers over to district attorney, when they've never personally observed or interviewed anybody who watched me for almost a decade be a prosecutor. So the fact of the matter is, I have excellent judgment. I'm incredibly fair. I know the difference between right and wrong, and I don't have to cheat to get convictions. But I'll make something clear. The political elite, which Steve Greenhut is speaking for, they don't want me to be district attorney. They're so used to a county where political corruption has been swept under the rug. The district attorney, when he ran 20 years ago, he promised he would not go after political corruption. There's a lot of fat and happy politicians and a lot of fat and happy insiders who don't want somebody really being a prosecutor in this county.
I think we'll circle back and maybe get into some specifics or examples where you think there has been lax prosecution or a failure to prosecute. But let's talk about the incident at Wahoo's Fish Taco, because I think that gets to both the temperament question and the use of legal power or whatever, and so let's talk about that. It was Good Friday 2015. The Wahoos in Foothill Ranch. A man comes to proselytize to you, wants to talk about the Bible and get you to convert or something, not knowing that you're already a Christian. But anyway, all right, and he was very persistent. You felt he was acting in a weird, threatening way. You go out to your car, you call 911. As you said, you're a former, or you are a reserve, former reserve officer. You've got a gun.
Right.
You got your loaded gun, handcuffs. You go back in the Wahoos and you handcuff the guy.
Right.
And then 911 gets there. They question him, hold him briefly to question him, and then they let him go. No charges filed. Voice of OC then wants to see some correspondence you had with the county spokesman about writing something, an explainer and all that, and it gets into a court case where the county's fighting not to release the records. Bottom line is the records get released. An attempt by the county to depose the editor who filed the public records
request.
It's a long
preamble.
They lost. Yes, but I'm just so people know. And then finally, court costs. You had to pay the legal fees of Voice of OC for $125,000. Okay, so you can take any part of that you want, but some people would say, my gosh, you're slapping handcuffs on a guy. Why don't you just wait for the police to get there? And then, Todd, you're using the law. You're trying to depose an editor who's going after a story, and this is what we may see as a prosecutor, that you will use, you will be heavy-handed, and you will come down on people.
All right, so let's take the legal first, okay, which I had nothing to do with. The entire legal case was handled by our county counsel.
Well, you could have told him lay off.
No, because in this particular instance, I had no problem. In fact, I offered the Voice of OC my op-ed early on, before there was, right after they were threatening with filing litigation. I said, I'm more than happy to give you this piece that I wrote to explain my state of mind, essentially. But they didn't want that as part of the settlement. They wanted a bunch of other documents, which the court agreed they weren't going to get, and it was all kinds of like documents associated with internal correspondence. So I never had any problem releasing anything about what happened. That's number one. So let's talk about the incident. First of all, we live in a world where people walk into restaurants and arenas and people get terribly hurt through no fault of their own. And it was Good Friday. I just walked the 12 Stations of the Cross, and I was sitting at a table where I was kind of in a booth. There was no exit, and this man, Mr. Castellano, came over and tried to interact with me. I actually pulled my cross out, which I wear around my neck, because he was trying to convert me and proselytize, but he wasn't making much sense. But it was clear he was kind of had a mission, and he was focused on me. You got to appreciate something. I was a legislator and passed some very hard laws. Sex offenders on the internet, for example. My law, now anybody can go on the internet, right, who's authorized, and they can find out where sex offenders live in their community. My family was threatened when I did that piece of legislation. I don't even let my little girl answer the door because, you know, of the situation of what I've been, and I've arrested people and I've prosecuted people. So when people come up to me in public, I'm on the natural a little bit apprehensive because I don't know who they are. I didn't know if I had arrested this guy, if I ever had an interaction, I didn't know. So he came over. It was a fairly okay conversation, but then in Wahoo's, they have knives, and everybody's joking.
Everybody is joking about that.
Yeah, and plastic knives and all that. Wahoo's only has steel serrated knives. And when you're a person like I was as a police officer, you've been trained in edge weapons. Look, I called the police first. You got the order a little bit wrong. I did call the police. They were trying to get him.
I thought I said that. You called.
No, you said I went outside first. No, I called them from inside.
Okay,
yeah.
fine. All right.
And so anyway, long story short, I did everything by the book. I called. I explained what was happening, but he had been separated and taken by a manager to the other side of the restaurant. But people were getting very worried in the restaurant. People started to leave. People left their meals in place.
All right,
and so I'm just telling you, Rick, is that I went outside, and when I came back in, he charged at me. That was the distinction. And when I asked him to stop, okay, that he was making me nervous, I asked his permission if I could handcuff him until the police arrived. And he said, absolutely. What he said was, quote, you can do anything it takes if I can preach the Bible to you.
Okay.
And so that's
all right.
That's what happened.
So the police let him go. Did they do the right thing? Should they have arrested him? I mean, they when the police arrived, they questioned him and felt, okay, they, told him to behave better, and they let him go.
Well, first of all, it didn't appear that he had committed any crime, but he certainly put a lot of fear in a lot of people in that restaurant. And this was obviously because of who I am, and rightfully so. This was completely investigated by the Sheriff's Department, and they concluded I didn't do anything inappropriate.
No, but they didn't charge that guy either.
No, but Sheriff Hutchins said that Spitzer did it by the book. And Rick, think about this. If I went in that restaurant, to your argument, right? If I went in the restaurant and I just split, I took off, right, and left all those people not knowing this guy with a loose shirt, and he hurt people, okay? You and others, oh my God, Todd Spitzer was there, prosecutor, trained police officer, and he abandoned it because he was only thinking of himself.
Well, no, it might have said you called 911 and, you...
Well, Rick, you don't know when 911 is going to get there. And first of all, it's been in the newspaper. When I was in Sacramento as a legislator, I stopped a shoplifter because security couldn't take him into custody, and I handcuffed him for them because they couldn't do it on their own. When I was a prosecutor, I stopped a carjacking in front of Chalk Hospital. back in the 90s. I mean, Rick, things happen, and I have special training, and I'm not going to abandon people in their safety.
Okay, going back to the legal issue, we only have 30 seconds. Would you have done anything differently? Do you the
on the
impression
Wahoos?
on the Voice of OC confrontation? A reporter trying to get information, and the county wants him deposed.
No. Again, you're putting a lot of responsibility on how that case was litigated.
Well, you can tell the county council, don't do that. I don't want Naberto on the witness stand, for gosh sake.
Okay. First of all, the tactics of how county council goes through their cases is really up to them.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with insisting that Roberto was deposed.
And we're ending this on a confrontational note, but there's a lot more to discuss and a lot of issues that you're interested in that we'll get into. So we're going to have a part 2. So
Excellent.
for now, this is it. That's it for right now. Thanks again to my guest, Todd Spitzer. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.